Welcome back to another FPL video. This will be a chip strategy guide for Gameweek 27 until the end of the season. I'll discuss my own plans for each of the chips I have remaining. I use the triple captain in Gameweek 25 and I'll be talking about the best times to use it for those that still have the triple captain in their back pocket, the bench booster, wildcard and the free hit, and also the FA Cup 5th round results and how they've impacted Blank Gameweek 29. You can see the fixtures on screen. Only 4 fixtures are taking place in 8 teams. The other 12 in the Premier League are all blanking in 29, and that will form doubles later in the season in game weeks such as 34 and 37. I'll be referring to projected fixtures, so a lot could still change, and some fixtures that might fall under Game Week 34 according to current predictions and projections, they might end up going into Game Week 37 and vice versa. So take it with a pinch of salt, smash the like button of this video if you enjoy it, and also be sure to subscribe. Check out all the links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on those platforms, join the Discord server, the FPL League, and check out Drafthound. I'll also be using this video as a way of updating you on my transfer plans following some injury news to players like Hwang Hee Chan. I talked about Solanke in the last video, but I'll refer to him once again, and there's a lot to discuss in general, so let's get straight into it, starting with the Blank Gameweek 29 fixtures and how we can tackle this game week with either hits or the free hit. Before the FA Cup results on the Tuesday and Wednesday, we already had 3 confirmed fixtures for Blank Gameweek 29, Burnley vs Brentford, Fulham vs Spurs, and West Ham vs Aston Villa, and that's what makes the likes of Bowen and Douglas Luiz very good purchases back in Blank Gameweek 26, not to mention their massive hauls in the game week just gone by. But we've got one more confirmed fixture after Manchester United beat Nottingham Forest at the death, and that has meant Luton Town versus Nottingham Forest falls under Game Week 29. Luton Town also lost 6-2 at home to Manchester City, and that's why we've got these 8 teams and these 4 fixtures. It makes it quite an awkward week. I don't think it's a very high ceiling. 50 points would probably be a good score in Game Week 29 and enough to see a green arrow. But the main appeal now of using the free hit is to use it in a defensive perspective and to prevent hits from being taken. Massive hits to cover Game Week 27, 28 and 29, and some assets that look really good for Game Week 29 don't look so good either before or after that period. And if you don't have the wild card, it's very important to think about that as well. There's no right or wrong way of approaching this. It's very team dependent, and I've currently got 2 avenues to navigating Blank Gameweek 29, which I'll discuss right now using Drafthound and fpl.team. I've got a lot of different avenues, not just for this game week, of course, in question, but also for the rest of the season, and that's what I'm going to cover in this video today. It's worth noting that in the FA Cup, Hwang Hee Chan was subbed off due to an injury, and Gary O'Neill, the Wolves manager, said he would be amazed if Hwang Hee Chan was ready to play Newcastle. So Hwang Hee Chan is pretty much effectively ruled out of Game Week 27. He might be back for Game Week 28 or 29, but he will blank, of course, in that game week in question. So therefore, Hwang Hee Chan's appeal has reduced dramatically, and of course, he did flop in Blank Game Week 26. Dominic Solanke I talked about the other day. It's not a serious knee issue, but it was enough to see him out of the squad against Leicester as Bournemouth lost in the FA Cup at home, and Iraola, the Bournemouth manager, said he hopes that Solanke is back for the weekend and he can help us. But if you really look at Solanke, I think he will be available for double Game Week 28, where a lot of you will be looking to use the triple captain, and I think it's a great opportunity with 2 home fixtures against Sheffield United and Luton Town. But let's now use the other websites like Drafthound and fpl.team to visualize the upcoming game weeks and discuss my transfer plans. Make sure to check out my team selection video to see how I did in Blank Gameweek 26 and my transfer plans for Game Week 27. Not much has changed on that front. The key difference is who I'm going to sell. I was originally set on selling Gordon, but it was a very close call between him, Palmer and Hwang Hee Chan. But with Wolves blanking in Game Week 29 and Hwang Hee Chan being ruled out of Game Week 27, I think he is the one to sell. He also didn't look impressive at all in Game Week 26 against Sheffield United, the worst defence and team in the Premier League. So it's a very simple transfer on paper. Unfortunately, a lot of people will be doing the same move, and that's what puts me off slightly, but I do trust Heung-min Son in the next 3-4 game weeks, and even if I decide to not use the free hit in Blank Gameweek 29, Son is a great way of navigating that game week without the use of that chip. And for me, Son is one of 3 players who are almost essential for Blank Gameweek 29, the other 2 being Ollie Watkins and Ivan Toney. Of course, that's definitely down to interpretation. There's other good assets like Douglas Luiz, Richarlison, and I'll be showing you a free hit team currently for Blank Gameweek 29 and the reasons why I'm not too keen on using the chip but I might have to because it would require a lot of hits for me to get to a respectable number of players and to cover most of the key assets in Blank Gameweek 29. But Drafthound are now recommending to sell Pedro Porro to Doughty, assuming that I don't free hit in Gameweek 29. But if I do, the main transfer they're recommending is Gabriel at the back, and that's one defender I really want for the next couple of weeks. And Doughty might come in for me in Gameweek 28. I don't think Gameweek 27 is the right time to do it, but a lot depends on Pedro Porro and his fitness. If he is not available, or if there is still a big doubt about him starting, my backups are Lascelles and Estupinian, who I don't trust at all. Many Man City predicted lineups I've seen include Nathan Ake in the Manchester derby. Then I've got Saliba, so that's fine, I would say. But the third defender slot is where it could be very problematic for me in Gameweek 27, and it could require a hit at the very least to navigate Gameweek 27 and also optimize my team for double Gameweek 28 and 29. So let's now head over to fpl.team and discuss my contingency plan just in case Pedro Porro isn't available for Gameweek 27. I don't trust Bournemouth defensively, but in order to optimize double Gameweek 28 and have those two plum fixtures at home and also a decent one away from home against Burnley in 27, I think going for Senesi could be a good call for me. I would sell Estupinian, bench Pedro Porro if he is out, and start Senesi away to Burnley. The main issue with the Argentine is that he's on 8 yellow cards. If he gets booked against Burnley, that means he's walking a tightrope in double Gameweek 28, and another booking in the first game of 28 would mean he's suspended for the last game against Luton Town, and that isn't ideal at all. And not only that, when a player gets to 10 yellow cards, they're suspended for 2 matches, and another plus point of Senesi is he has a decent fixture in Gameweek 30 against Everton at home, whilst the likes of Saliba and Ake are facing each other, and ideally I wouldn't want to start both of them in Gameweek 30. So I think Senesi is a great way of optimizing Gameweek 27, 28 and Gameweek 30 before ultimately wildcarding around Gameweek 31, which is my current plan. That's not to say you need to wildcard in 31 as well. It might be best for your team to wildcard in 30, or maybe wait for later in the season, as I'll discuss later in this video. But in Gameweek 27, this will be my team. If Pedro Porro is out, I'd go for Ariel in goal, Saliba, Ake and Senesi as the back three, a midfield four of Saka, Foden, Palmer and Heung-min Son, and a front three of Tony, Haaland and Watkins. And I would bench Dubravka, Gordon, Pedro Porro and Lascelles, and maybe if Pedro Porro is out, I might also put off the Heung-min Son transfer for at least another week, not take a -4 hit, and just start Anthony Gordon instead of Heung-min Son. That's an alternative I am considering, so I do have those backup plans just in case the worst comes to happen. But going into double Gameweek 28, this looks very poor, by the way. I'm not going to lie to you. This is my aggressive set of transfer plans to avoid free hitting in Gameweek 29. So it's not set in stone, but it's something I am considering. So in double Gameweek 28, I would buy Doughty, Barkley, and buy back Solanke, assuming he's fit by then, and I think he will be. And that would be for a -8 hit, and it would include selling the likes of Erling Haaland away to Liverpool. Despite the tough fixture, I think Haaland still will have opportunities in that game, and it's not ideal to sell him as part of a -8 hit. The other transfers could include selling Anthony Gordon to Ross Barkley and buying Doughty for Lascelles, which is the best transfer, of course. So Lascelles is absolutely useless right now, but the other two transfers aren't the best really on paper. Selling Gordon and Haaland for a -8 practically, and benching Foden, this might be something I reconsider. But the reason why I was actually talking about buying 2 Luton Town players in the first place is because of their double in 28, 2 away fixtures against Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. But then if you go to Gameweek 29, they feature against Nottingham Forest at home, and with yet another -4 hit in Blank Gameweek 29, I could easily field 9 players, which is a decent amount, but if we really break it down, that would be a massive number of hits. -16 in Gameweek 27, 28 and 29. So that's where the free hit really comes into play. For scenarios such as mine, you already eliminate the -16 you take pretty much, or most of the hits you're taking for the next couple of weeks to optimize Blank Gameweek 29. You can really just focus instead on double Gameweek 28, and perhaps going later in the season to Gameweek 30 if you're prepared to save the wildcard for later on. But I do cover most of the key options in Blank Gameweek 29. Watkins, Tony, Son, Richarlison and Bowen. You can even go for Maddison, alongside Richarlison and Son, or replace Richarlison with James Maddison. That's something else you could do. I don't think any of the defenders are essential in Blank Gameweek 29. I think all the games could be high scoring, and I don't trust any of the defences on show. Aston Villa probably have the best one, but it's away from home against West Ham, and I expect both teams to score in that game. So a lot could change, of course. The expected points would be roughly 54.7 according to FPL.team, but there is a -4 hit that also does play a part. Now, if I were to free hit in Gameweek 29, it could look something like this, where I've got Flecken in goal, away to Burnley, Doughty, Bedro, who I already have with my provisional transfers and hits for Gameweek 28 and 29. Region would complete the back line, and then a midfield 5 of Bowen, Bailey, Richarlison, Son, and Kudus, but that could easily be Anthony Elanga, who is an underrated option for Blank Gameweek 29, and a front 2 of Tony and Ollie Watkins. The bench is Areola, Awani, Alex Moreno, and Taylor. And according to FPL.team, the expected points does go up if I start Awani over Kudus, and it goes up even higher if I go for Elanga. So it would be around 54.7 there with a former Manchester United player, and I still cover most of the key options. I prevent all the hits. That's the most important thing, and that's why I might end up using the free hit in a defensive way, and instead for Gameweek 34 and 37, I'll be using transfers and taking hits to chase the upside in those double game weeks. So that's my current plan. Let me know what you think. Would you play the free hit in my scenario, or would you just take hits? I think the logical thing for me to do is to play the free hit in Gameweek 29 and not take that many hits to optimize Gameweek 28 and 29. So that's something I'm still yet to decide on fully, but free hit is probably the safer pick, and also one that saves me a lot of hits later down the line. So that is the provisional Gameweek 29 free hit team that I could play. It doesn't look great. I don't think the ceiling is particularly high. I agree with FPL.team. I think the expected points for the best team possible is probably around 50 points, and you are really relying on a big captaincy score from a Son, a Watkins, or Tony to really boost that score overall. But if we go back to my normal team using free transfers, if I were to go for the aggressive hits route in Gameweek 30, I would have a setup of Dubravka in goal, but it could easily be Areola. I don't trust any of them, to be honest. The back three would be Senesi, Bedro, and Ake at home to Arsenal. A midfield 4 of Salah, Palmer, Richarlison, and Heung-min Son, and the front three is Tony, Solanke, and Watkins. And as you can see, no Erling Haaland and no Bukayo Saka as they face each other. That could be a huge risk, and that's why some people might just wildcard in Gameweek 30. I think it is a bit of an awkward time to use the chip because Arsenal and Man City are playing each other, and going into the long term, you probably want to have 2 or 3 players from each team, particularly Arsenal, who have more nailed-on players than Manchester City in general. The bench will be Areola, Bowen, Doughty, and Saliba. Then going into Gameweek 31, this is very hypothetical and very provisional to say the least. This is where I could wildcard. That is my current plan, and that's where I could load up on the Arsenal assets and even Manchester City. So Dubravka could be in goal, and if I look at the 2 goalkeepers, I think that's the most likely to change from this wildcard squad. And a lot can change from now, at the time of this recording, the 28th of February, going into Gameweek 27, and by the time we get to Gameweek 31, because injuries, suspensions, so much could definitely come into play, new players rising to the fore. So this is just a hypothetical wildcard team, and I could go for a Kanji, Saliba, Gabriel as the back three, a midfield 5 of Foden, Salah, Palmer, Gordon, Saka, and a front 2 of Haaland and Solanke, and the bench is quite decent with Areola, Højlund, Richards, and Branthwaite. But that's not the important thing, talking about hypothetical Gameweek 31 wildcards. It's about the chips and when to play them. So with this team, for example, going into Gameweek 32, good setup, it's all looking good. The captaincy would be split between Salah, Saka, and Haaland. Gameweek 33, the same thing, and I can start to put the likes of Højlund in the starting 11 with a great fixture on there for Manchester United. But then Gameweek 34 is when we start to enter the double Gameweek territory yet again, and we also have some blanks. So just to put it into perspective, these are provisional, they are not set in stone, but the doubles in Gameweek 34 could include Arsenal, who would have Wolves away and Chelsea at home. Crystal Palace would face West Ham at home and Newcastle at home. Everton would have Nottingham Forest at home and Liverpool at home, and then Sheffield United would have Burnley at home and Manchester United away. So not a great set of doubles, but there's also 2 teams blanking, as I mentioned, and those are Fulham and Tottenham Hotspur, and that's mainly down to the FA Cup, of course, and the repercussions of Game Week 29, but Spurs would have a double later down the line, as you'll see here. So Game Week 35, once again, it looks pretty solid. Remember, I would have plenty of free transfers to navigate this. I could also take the occasional hit here and there to optimize each game week as we go along. Then in Game Week 36, we would have a small double potentially, and it would be two teams, Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur. Chelsea's double could be West Ham at home and Spurs at home, and Tottenham Hotspur would face Liverpool away and Chelsea away. So that's where the likes of Palmer going for Son and other Spurs assets. And Game Week 36 is an awkward one because Chelsea and Spurs have the doubles, but as I just mentioned, the Spurs double isn't particularly great. It's 2 away fixtures against Liverpool and Chelsea, but you could feasibly even free hit in a small double game week like 36, triple up on Chelsea and Spurs, and that's where you could offload Salah for just one game week, even Erling Haaland, because in 37 and 38, you probably want them in your team, and both teams will double in Game Week 37 according to these projections. In Game Week 37, that's where I'd be looking to use the bench boost, and I could have the Dubravka in goal, Saliba, Branthwaite, Akanji, also Foden, Gordon, Salah, Palmer, and go for Højlund, Solanke, Erling Haaland, and a bench of Areola, Saka, Gabriel, and Richards. Now, that would definitely be different by that stage, and I have plenty of transfers to optimize that bench boost, and maybe even have 2 or 3 players there who have a double, and the captaincy would be different. It'd most likely be between Haaland and Salah. So that's all hypothetical, of course, but in Game Week 37, that's going to be the biggest double game week of the season, according to these predictions. So Bournemouth would have a double of Brentford at home and Wolves away. Brighton would face Newcastle away and Chelsea at home. Chelsea would face Nottingham Forest away and Brighton away. Fulham would face Manchester City at home and Liverpool at home. That is an awful double, to say the least. Liverpool would have Aston Villa away and Fulham away. Manchester City would have 2 away fixtures against Fulham and Spurs. Manchester United would have 2 home games against Arsenal and Newcastle. Then you've got Newcastle facing Brighton at home and Manchester United away. Spurs having 2 home fixtures against Burnley and Manchester City. So Heung-min Son could be a decent triple captaincy opportunity potentially in 37. And then Wolves, the final team to double, Crystal Palace at home and Bournemouth at home. So that's 10 teams that could double in Game Week 37. And that's where the bench boost has the highest ceiling due to the sheer number of fixtures on offer. And of course, I mentioned Heung-min Son as a potential triple captaincy option, but of course the same applies for Salah and Erling Haaland. In Game Week 30, you've got Bukayo Saka with a potential double. So you've got plenty of triple captaincy opportunities left. Game Week 28 on Solanke, Game Week 34 on a Bukayo Saka, then in Game Week 36 potentially on Palmer or Heung-min Son, and in Game Week 37, Haaland, Salah, or Son once again, depending on your preference. A lot of this is hypothetical. The game weeks could change around a little bit, so the doubles take place in other game weeks instead, as I mentioned before. But in terms of my chip strategy, looking at all these game weeks and looking so far ahead into the season, I've used the triple captaincy already. My recommendation for the triple captain, if you still have it, is Game Week 28 on Solanke with 2 of the best home games you can really have. But of course, that depends on Solanke's fitness. If he does miss out against Burnley this weekend and he's a doubt for Game Week 28, then I would reconsider and instead go for one of Saka in Game Week 34, one of Son, Salah or Haaland in Game Week 37. Even Game Week 36 could be decent with the likes of Palmer and Son, but that would be lower down in my priorities based on the fixtures, and I also do trust players like Haaland and Salah even more than the rest. But of course, that's all hypothetical, as I mentioned many times. I want to make that very clear, and it's not all set in stone. But it's also worth mentioning with maybe Man City and Liverpool assets in Game Week 37, there could be mass rotation by that stage. You've got the FA Cup coming into play. You've also got the Champions League and Europa League for these clubs, and there could be rotation in the Premier League, especially if the league title is wrapped up by one of these teams. You just never know what could happen. So it's worth taking that into account, and that's why my preference would be triple captaining Solanke in double Game Week 28 if possible. Now, if we look at Game Week 38 as well, I'd have a decent setup with that Game Week 31 provisional team, and a lot of transfers will be made in the interim. I'm not the type of manager that goes multiple weeks without making any moves. I like to tinker, sometimes excessively like a Guardiola, and it doesn't pay off a lot of times in FPL. But ultimately, you can see a solid, concise plan for my chip strategy and also my team until Game Week 38. It's very easy to plan ahead like this, but a lot of things come into play with suspensions, injuries, and things that really rock your boat, and you have to change and adapt your plans accordingly. But looking at the free hit, there are many weeks to really play this chip. I even mentioned Gameweek 36 as a possibility. There could also be the odd blank game week here and there that isn't covered by these projected fixtures. But I think the best times to use the free hit include Gameweek 34, 37 and 29. I'd probably put 34 as the ideal time to use it because you've got a combination of 4 teams doubling, with a few of them being quite poor teams on paper, like Crystal Palace, Everton and Sheffield United, and you also have 2 teams blanking in Fulham and Spurs potentially, and that's where the free hit is ideal to use. But if not, a very safe way to use it, a defensive way of doing it, would be Gameweek 29, preventing hits and just building a solid, sensible team that will guarantee you a green arrow in Blank Gameweek 29. I think Gameweek 36 and 37 are also good times to use it, but I'd much rather use the bench boost in Gameweek 37. The alternative for the bench boost would be Gameweek 34, which also has plenty of doubles. But 37, due to the sheer number of teams doubling, potentially up to 10, that makes it an ideal time to use the bench boost. The only downside to that is that for pretty much most of the season, you're going to be having a stacked bench. That means team selection dilemmas, bench points, a lot of frustration, and you won't be able to spend as much money as you want in the starting 11, which is probably the ideal thing to do if you want to go for Son, Salah and Saka at the same time, and also maybe add an Erling Haaland on top of it. So that's where a stacked bench could really deprive you of having the best starting 11 possible and those foundations for most of the doubles and blanks for the rest of the season. So in terms of the wild card, I think that's best used in conjunction with the bench boost. So that's why a lot of you will be using the wild card in Gameweek 34 or 35 to optimize a bench boost in Gameweek 37. But my current plan is to use it in Gameweek 31, and I still think you can use it in such a way where you navigate Gameweek 34, have a very solid base for that, and also you have plenty of transfers to build and optimize your Gameweek 37 bench boost. So there's different ways of playing it, but I think the wildcard is best used in either Gameweek 30 or 31, depending on your team, and if not, I'd save it for Gameweek 34 or 35. And with the wildcard being the most powerful chip, you probably want to have it be effective for you for more game weeks in general, and not just for 2 or 3 game weeks to wrap up the season. And that's why, despite the fact that many of you will be looking to use it in Gameweek 34 or 35, I think even more will be using it earlier around Gameweek 31, and I think that's what I'm going to be doing at this moment in time. So just to reiterate, my current chip strategy is to use the wildcard in Gameweek 31. 30 would be an alternative time to use it, and I am open to saving it for later in the season, but Gameweek 31 is what my current plan is. Then the bench boost would be Gameweek 37. I think that's what I'm kind of set on, and despite other game weeks looking quite decent for a bench boost, even some single game week opportunities could be quite decent, I think Gameweek 37 is the best time due to the sheer number of fixtures that we could have on offer. As for the free hit, it's between 2 game weeks for me. I've still not fully decided this despite the FA Cup results and what's happened, but Gameweek 34 or 29 are the 2 game weeks I'm looking to use it, and as things stand, I'm more likely to use it in Gameweek 29, but I have to say, for those watching, I wouldn't be in too much of a fuss of getting a full 11 out for Blank Gameweek 29, because as you can see, the ceiling for Gameweek 29 isn't particularly high. There's only 4 fixtures, 8 teams doubling, and they're not of particularly high quality. So if you can get to 7+ players with not that many hits, and you cover most of the key options like Son, Tony and Watkins, I think that's absolutely fine, and you don't need to use the free hit. In my scenario, I'm struggling to get to a respectable number. I need to take many hits, and I'm also kind of justifying potential hits with optimizing double Gameweek 28 and also 27 and 30, but ultimately taking a -16 over the course of 3 game weeks is far too excessive, and that's why I'm looking at using the free hit in Gameweek 29. It also leads to an alternative strategy about wildcarding in Gameweek 27, so you prevent all the hits you would need to take to get 4 or 5 doublers in Gameweek 28, and also having a full 11 in Gameweek 29, or at least 9 or 10 players without needing to take any hits, and you also have a decent platform for Gameweek 30 and the rest of the season. There are many different approaches and ways of tackling this, but my main issue of wildcarding in Gameweek 27 is the fact that you'd probably want 1 or 2 Man City players to target that Manchester United fixture, but then there's sells in Gameweek 28 and 29 29, then you probably want them back immediately afterwards. So it's an awkward time to wildcard from that perspective alone, but not to mention you might miss out, or it makes it more difficult to buy back the likes of Salah in Gameweek 30, and that's where things get a bit more tricky, and you would have to maybe take hits later down the line to navigate Gameweek 34, a mixture of blanks and doubles, Gameweek 37 to optimize the bench boost, but also the other doubles that happen beforehand, potentially in Gameweek 36 for Tottenham and Chelsea, and there's a lot of unknowns that can happen. Of course, there's different ways of playing it. You could argue that wildcarding in Gameweek 35 is far too late, and wildcarding in 27 is far too early. I don't think the timing is particularly bad, but I think based on fixture swings and many other factors, wildcarding now could result in you struggling to get those Liverpool assets and potentially Manchester City around Gameweek 30 and beyond. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. For me, the best time to use the triple captain is Gameweek 28 on Solanke with those 2 home fixtures. If he is injured for one of those games or he's still a doubt, then I would probably postpone it to either Gameweek 34, 36 or 37, depending on when you're using the other chips as well. And I'm looking to wildcard in Gameweek 31, the free hit in Gameweek 34 or 29, and I think 29 is more likely in my scenario, and Gameweek 37 I think is the best time to bench boost, not just for me, but for most people in FPL. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the FPL League, and Drafthound. All of that is there. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 27 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.